Well, I think it could be all three, but depends on what phase we are talking about. When G20 was launched, it clearly was the rescue squad, because it was an emergency situation, the world economy was on the brink, and G20 had to act very promptly and together to save the world economy. Having done that, now the question is, what does it do? Does it actually act as a steering committee to move the world economy towards a safer region, or it simply acts as a clearinghouse of world leaders, where the issues are brought up to them and they say yes, go ahead, or no, we cannot agree. But whatever it is, so these both are actually happening. For instance, when the G20 met in Seoul last November, the leaders of G20 actually helped hasten the process of accepting the Basel III agreement on banking, which was hanging fire for a number of years. And eventually their presence and their talking among themselves and agreeing that we should go ahead. So that green light that came from Seoul was a very important development. So it clearly acted as a clearinghouse. And then in terms of being a steering committee, it raises the question of steering towards what, steering to do what. So before actually you can really steer the world economy in a desired direction, you have to develop a common objective that members agree, and that is the process now. It is starting, that assessment process that is being that begun in Seoul, and that should actually be useful to carry on, so that the leaders have a common platform, a common agenda that they can work towards. I think for the average audience, average citizen, these alphabet soups are kind of make their eye glaze over. Yeah, earlier it was G7, G8, G13, G20. So this doesn't really mean much to general average citizen. So the question is to make the issues more accessible to the public, that what are being discussed in this opaque sort of gathering of leaders actually concerns them. It is concerns their livelihood, their future. And so the task for the government parties, of the officials, is to actually be proactive in bringing out the issues well before the leaders are asked to decide. The issues have to be debated in public. The public has to support what they are trying to achieve. And unless you build up a public support, you cannot agree to something which is going to be unpopular at home. And that has been a major problem of G20. So in order to make G20 interesting to the citizens of the country, you have to make the issues more comprehensible to the public. Yeah, I think again, one has to be really pragmatic about this, because the leaders, as heads of government, heads of state, they do not have endless time to engage in a free-flowing discussion which can go on for hours. So you have to prepare the background well, so that whatever issue you are going to discuss, they are fully briefed, and more importantly, they believe that it is in their interest. So before actually something is brought up, unless it has the support of most of the members that it is something they want to achieve, simply discussing is not going to solve the problem. So the question is, if you have a secretariat, and secretariat is engaged throughout the year, planning ahead and preparing the dossiers or the issues that will be discussed, making this very, very simple and available to the leaders, that would be useful. But what I am afraid though is that this secretariat can actually become a huge bureaucracy which will employ some people, but may not actually move the agenda fast. So, it has to be of a size that is manageable, that is focused, that has a clear agenda what they want to do, but not get involved in too much paper pushing and bureaucracy. It's an interesting issue because there are questions on which the G20 countries, not all of them may be as informed or as interested, and yet there are countries whose future or fate will be determined by whatever G20 agrees to do. So, I think in situation like this, to invite a selected number of people, countries who are directly affected by the issue concerned, would be very helpful to the G20 members to have a better understanding of the issues, not only because they would make them to make a good policy, but also it would take into account the interest of those countries who are not members, but who will be most affected. So, that way their policy what they accept would have more legitimacy. So, that way I think expanding including periodically including other non-members into discussion, I think is a very good idea.